the glowing link on the screen a single venomous line of text. It wasn't something you stumbled upon. It was something that found you. For Leo, it arrived in a private message on an anonymous forum at 3 a.m. after a 14-hour shift at a diner where the smell of old grease clung to his clothes like a second skin. Want to become invisible to debt? Click. But be ready to pay in a different currency. Leo clicked without thinking. He was too tired to think. Tired of the ramshackle apartment on the outskirts of Cleveland where the wail of ambulance sirens was a nightly soundtrack. Tired of sending every last dollar to his sister Clara, who had given up her own college dreams to raise him after their parents died in a car crash. The weight of that sacrifice pressed down on him heavier than the world. He didn't just owe the banks. He owed her a life. He had tried everything. Get-rich-quick schemes, online surveys that promised gift cards, even shady crypto forums where he'd lost his meager savings to scammers with empty promises. Each failure dug the pit in his stomach a little deeper. The link led him to a closed forum, its name spelled out in blood-red letters, the Zoya Society. The group had only 100 or so members, but each one seemed transformed. The photos they posted weren't fake. Lamborghinis parked in front of Miami mansions, Patek Philippe watches glittering on tanned wrists on yachts in the Mediterranean. Every post came with a hashtag, Zoya opened the door for me. But it wasn't the luxury that captivated Leo. It was her, Zoya. She rarely wrote, but when she did, her words resonated like prophecies. The world only gives itself to those willing to give their world away. Fire only burns the hesitant soul. There is more peace in an offering than in a prayer. Leo had never read anything like it. It went beyond the positive thinking platitudes he'd seen. This was something primal, dangerous, and powerful. One evening, with a trembling hand, he sent her a private message. He wrote only, "I'm ready, even if it's terrifying." It took her 4 days to reply. "Fear is the door, but some never walk through it. Give me your name, your city, and your silence." Leo responded instantly. "Leo, Cleveland. I will be silent." Zoya's message came at 2:37 a.m. "You have been deemed suitable. We are waiting. 4 nights. No more, no less. Ask for Mr. Allister. He is in the group. He is the one who prepares the bodies." The name echoed strangely in Leo's mind. He remembered seeing it in the forum's comments. Some called him the facilitator, others the gatekeeper. All seemed to agree on one point. At his place, the soul changes. He left a message for Mr. Allister, who gave him the location to go. The next day, Leo took an Uber. The car drove him out of the city to an area where once grand houses now stood and rot their gardens overgrown with weeds. The driver stopped at a crossroads. "This is as far as I go," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Leo got out. He walked toward a crumbling building as instructed, its white paint peeling like snakeskin. A man was waiting at the gate. He smiled, but his eyes didn't. They were as cold and empty as river stones. "You are Zoya's?" he whispered. It wasn't a question. Leo nodded. The man, Mr. Allister, slowly opened the rusty gate. Inside, in a dimly lit room, with only a chair and a bare bulb overhead, sat another young man. He looked even younger than Leo, maybe in his early 20s, and anxiety radiated off him like heat. He glanced at Leo once, then quickly looked away. "He is Ethan. He arrived this morning. There will be 2 of you for this cycle," Allister said. "Tonight you will begin the first passage." Then he closed the door, the sound of the bolt sliding home like the lid of a coffin shutting. Leo sat. Ethan was on the other side of the room, still not looking at him. They didn't speak for hours. Night fell without warning. Mr. Allister entered. "The first passage begins now." Leo felt his stomach clench. "Take off all your clothes. Now." He had known this was coming. Zoya had mentioned the nakedness of sacrifice, but he didn't think it would be so soon, so brutal. "Everything." Allister repeated, his voice allowing no argument. There must be nothing between you and the eye of the night. The two young men slowly complied. Alistair threw them 2 bags of red clay. Cover your bodies with this. They did as they were told, their hands trembling as the cold, damp clay touched their skin. Listen carefully, Alistair whispered as he opened the back gate of the house which led to a dark alley. You must walk to the crossroads over there and back. 3 times. No one must see you. Not a scream, not a glance. If they do, the pact is reversed. He paused, letting the words sink in. And if a dog follows you, do not run. Just keep walking. Even if it growls. Leo swallowed hard. Ethan walked quickly, tense, his fists clenched. Leo trailed behind. The cold October night air clung to his bare skin. They reached the crossroads. Leo slowly turned his head. Nothing. Not a single passerby, not a car. They made it back once, then a second time. On the 3rd trip, a car suddenly appeared at the end of the street. Its headlights flared like 2 fiery eyes. Hide, Ethan hissed. The 2 men dove behind a withered hedge. Sharp branches scratched at their clay-covered skin. The car passed slowly and disappeared. They emerged, scratched and dirty. Come on, Leo whispered. Let's finish this. The last few steps, the final turn. The house came into view, but the gate was wide open. And in that opening, standing motionless, were 3 dark shapes waiting. Large, silent dogs. 3 pit bulls, no leashes, no collars. Their eyes gleamed in the darkness, but none of them growled, none of them moved. Leo stopped dead. His breath caught in his throat. Ethan took a step back. They're going to attack us, he stammered. But nothing happened. Not a movement, not a sound. The dogs simply stared, sentinels of muscle and teeth. Then softly, Alistair's voice came from the shadows. Walk. They obeyed each step, bringing them closer to the fangs. Leo could feel the hot, foul breath of the beasts, but he didn't falter. As they passed through the gate, the dogs let them in as if they were never there, as if they were just phantoms of the night. In the courtyard, Alistair observed them for a long moment. Good. The spirits have let you pass. He approached, grabbing Ethan's arm, then Leo's, and smelled their skin. The fear is still there. That's a good sign. It attracts what we are about to awaken. He raised a hand to the sky. Now go into the back room. Leo glanced back at the dogs still standing guard at the gate. And a chilling thought struck him. What if the dogs weren't there to keep them from getting in but to block their way out? The door slammed shut behind them, the bolt echoing with a heavy finality. They were locked in. The room was even barer than the last, with no furniture but a thick layer of dust on the floor and a smell of damp rot. Ethan slumped against a wall, pulling his knees to his chest. He was shaking uncontrollably, sweat mixing with the dried clay on his body to form grimy streaks. Leo, by contrast, remained standing. His skin was still clammy with clay, his breathing shallow, but he forced himself to stay upright. He didn't dare speak, afraid the sound that would come out of his throat would be a scream. Then a creak came from somewhere behind them. Both turned at once. A door they hadn't noticed, almost blending in with the filthy wall, was slowly opening. The first thing that hit Leo was the stench. It was an unbearable mix of burnt grease, rusted metal, and foul excrement. The very air seemed to rot as she came through. She was a woman, or what was left of one. Her skin was glistening, completely coated in a thick black, viscous liquid. It dripped from her matted hair onto her expressionless face and puddled on the floor. She moved slowly, shuffling her eyes vacant and dull. Ethan huddled deeper into his corner, a choked sob escaping him. Leo felt his stomach heave. There was no doubt anymore. This was not a test of courage. This was a defilement. Alistair appeared in the doorway, silent as a ghost. She is the one through whom the leap is made. He approached them, his voice sharp as a razor. You must honor her. Completely. 3 nights, he added. Not one less. No, we can't. Ethan whispered, his voice lost to terror. The old man slapped him hard across the face, the sound cracking in the silent room. "If you refuse, you will be the one stripped bare before the dogs." Then turning to Leo in a lower, almost conspiratorial tone, "The clay is not enough, son. It is her body that will cleanse you." Leo stood frozen, his mind screaming, but his body unable to move. Alistair stepped back quietly and disappeared into the shadows. "Begin," his voice commanded from beyond. With silent sobs, Ethan crawled toward the woman. He squeezed his eyes shut. Leo turned his face away, his heart feeling like it would burst. He couldn't watch. Instead, he listened. He heard Ethan's ragged breaths, the sickening squelch on the floor, and the woman's terrifying silence. He felt a part of himself die that night. The second night she returned. Same oil, same stench, same ritual. It would be so for 3 nights. And each morning Leo wasn't dead, but he was no longer alive either. He simply existed in a hazy space of revulsion and endurance. On the second night after the ritual was over, Leo heard an argument. It was Ethan and Alistair. He pressed his ear to the door. "You promised it wouldn't be like this," Ethan shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Not this. I don't want to do that with that woman anymore." The old man didn't shout back. His voice was calm, ice cold. "Do you think you have a choice? Do you think we are keeping you here for your comfort? You will leave here walking, or we will carry you out." The silence that followed was more terrifying than the threats. The third night passed, and the final ritual was performed. The next morning, the day of departure, Ethan sat in the corner of the room, silent, his eyes empty. He didn't say a word. Leo tried to speak to him, but there was no response. It was as if he were just an empty shell, as if his soul had already left. Leo realized a horrifying truth. Ethan was never going to leave this house. Before Leo left, Alistair called him over. He gave Leo a list of instructions, his voice devoid of emotion. "Open a new account at a bank where your name has never existed. Do exactly as we told you. When you find what you need to find under your pillow, go out, throw it away, and most importantly, never look back." Leo left Alistair's house without looking back. He didn't dare. He could feel the eyes of the dogs on him and the ghost of the boy named Ethan who had been left behind. When he returned to his apartment, the outside world seemed foreign and loud. The usual sirens, the laughter of neighbors, it all sounded distant like echoes from another life. He followed the instructions. He went to a bank downtown, a place he'd never been, and opened a new checking account. The procedure felt absurd mundane after what he had been through. The next morning when he woke up, he immediately felt something was wrong. The air in the room seemed thicker. He slid his hand under his pillow and found it. A stack of cash held together by a rubber band. He didn't count it. He didn't want to know. He didn't think. He took a Ziploc bag from the kitchen, put the stack of money inside, and walked to a busy flea market a few blocks away. He approached a storm drain, lifted the iron grate, and dropped the bag of money into it. A nearby vendor called out to him. "Hey, buddy, did you just drop something?" Leo looked at him, trying to force a smile. "Just a bag of trash." He walked away, feeling strangely light. He had followed the rules. At 3:47 a.m. that morning, his phone vibrated. He hadn't heard a notification sound in days, but now it was an avalanche. Transfer received. Transfer received. Transfer received. He opened his banking app. The balance showed an unreal number more money than he had ever imagined in his entire life. His hands shook. He started to laugh, a dry, broken sound in the silent room. Then the laughter turned into sobs. He had done it. He had paid the price. And now he was rich. The next day he dressed in nice clothes, went out and spent money. He bought a new car with cash. He ate at a restaurant he had only ever dared to look at through the window. And for a few hours, he felt alive. But when night fell, when he was alone in his new luxury apartment, the silence returned, and with it the memories, the stench, Ethan's empty eyes, And Alistair's warning echoed in his head, never look back. He knew he hadn't just bought wealth. He had bought a different kind of debt, and he had a feeling that one day the collector would come calling. As the money started to flow, Leo was smart. He didn't change abruptly to maintain the illusion. He kept his old apartment for a few months, driving his new car only at night. He sent money to Clara, but not too much, just enough for her to pay off her debts and maybe start thinking about going back to school. Each transfer was accompanied by a short message. Work is going well. Love you, Leo. Just enough so she wouldn't ask questions, so she would think he was doing well, but not so well as to arouse suspicion. He was building a wall between his two worlds, one of light and one of the darkness he had entered. A year passed. Leo settled into his new life. He owned a penthouse in downtown Cleveland with a view of Lake Erie. He dated beautiful women and ate at the finest restaurants. He had learned how to pretend, how to project the confidence of someone born into wealth. But beneath the polished exterior, there was a hollowness, a simmering fear that never subsided. Sometimes in the middle of the night, he would wake up in a cold sweat, the phantom smell of burnt grease and rusted metal in the air. He would take a hot shower trying to scrub the memory away, but the stain was bone deep. One afternoon, as Leo was enjoying a rare, quiet moment in a discreet restaurant, he felt a presence. At first it was almost imperceptible, but then it became palpable, as if someone had just sucked all the air out from around him. He looked up. She was there. Not the woman from the ritual, but someone else entirely. She was elegant, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, her hair in a neat bun. She could have been a corporate executive or a powerful lawyer. But her eyes held the same cold emptiness he remembered so well. She stopped at his table. "Hello, Leo." He flinched. "Do we know each other?" he asked, his voice shakier than he would have liked. She smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course not." She sat down without being invited. "Are you living well? You have been blessed, haven't you?" He didn't answer. She continued. "I came to check. Nothing more." "Check what?" "That you haven't forgotten to be grateful. And to give back." An icy shiver ran down his spine. I don't understand." She laughed a dry sound. "No one ever does. Not until they're knocking on the lid of their coffin. But you're smarter than the others." She took out a small black box, placed it on the table, and stood up. "This is not a warning. It is a continuation." "Wait," he said, his voice almost a plea. "Who are you?" She leaned down, her lips close to his ear. "I am what comes after the money," she whispered. Then she turned and disappeared into the crowd. She didn't walk. She seemed to dissolve. Leo stared at the box. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a human fingernail, fresh still with blood on it, and a rolled-up piece of paper. He unrolled it. It read, "Give a name or yours will be taken." He didn't sleep that night. He knelt, pressing his forehead against the cold marble floor of his penthouse, and he wept. He wept for the soul he had sold, for the innocence he had lost, and for the boy named Ethan he had left behind. He knew now that he faced a choice even worse than what he had endured in that house. He could sacrifice someone else, or be sacrificed himself. He hesitated for hours. He tossed and turned in his silk sheets, opening the box, closing it, then opening it again. He didn't want to sacrifice anyone. He wanted to believe there was another way out, a way to escape this pact. But he knew there wasn't. The Zoya Society was not a charity. They didn't bestow blessings. They made transactions. And now it was time to pay. It was on that day that Sarah, his girlfriend, came to his apartment. He had forgotten about her, or rather he had tried to keep his distance. She was a sweet woman, a vibrant artist, too bright for the world that had become his. She still loved him. She was worried about him, and that morning, unannounced, she showed up. "Leo," she whispered when he opened the door, her eyes narrowed with concern. He tried to smile. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" She stepped inside. "Why haven't you been answering my calls?" He looked away. "I've been busy. A really stressful week. It's nothing. She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze searching for something he couldn't give her. Are you okay? He nodded, but the gesture was stiff, his eyes evasive. Sarah placed her palm on his cheek. He flinched at the contact at its warmth. You're trembling, Leo. Tell me the truth. He took a deep breath, then said weakly, I'm fine. I just need some rest. She shivered, though the room wasn't cold. You've changed, she whispered. No, he replied. The world around me has changed. She stood there for a few more seconds, trapped in that suffocating silence, then whispered, If you ever really want to talk, I'm here. He nodded, but he knew. He would probably never see her again, and as the door closed behind her, the silence returned thicker, heavier. A few days after Sarah's visit, Leo sat on the floor, his hands shaking. He opened the small box the woman had given him, took out the small piece of paper. Slowly, as if each letter tore a piece from his throat, he wrote her name. Sarah. The name he used to whisper in the dark, the name he would now never be able to speak again. After he finished writing, he placed the paper back in the box and closed the lid. A few moments later, the box caught fire, a black flame that produced no heat, simply turning the box and its contents to ash before his eyes. Leo began to weep. The next morning, he received a notification. Transfer received. The amount was even larger than the last time. He started crying again. If only he had known. 3 days later, he learned that his girlfriend had been found dead in her bathroom. Officially, it was due to a sudden heart attack. A young, healthy woman with no history of heart problems. No one could explain it. But Leo knew. He was the cause. He was the murderer. And he knew this was only the beginning. Sarah's death broke something inside Leo. The wealth now tasted like ash in his mouth. The luxurious penthouse felt like a tomb, its walls whispering her name. He started to drink heavily. It was the only way to drown out the voice in his head, the one that called him a murderer. One night in a drunken haze, he decided to go back to the place of the ritual where it all began. Maybe if he could see it again, he could understand. Maybe he could find Alistair and beg for a way out. He drove through the dark, the memory of the route disturbingly clear. But Alistair's house was gone. In its place was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and littered with trash. There was no sign that a building had ever stood there. No foundation, no debris, nothing. It was as if it had never existed, erased from reality. It was then he understood. The pact wasn't an event. It was a seed, one that had been planted in him, growing slowly, methodically, and sooner or later it would demand all the space. He couldn't go back. He couldn't negotiate. He could only pay. Another year passed, a year blurred by alcohol and isolation. He had cut off contact with almost everyone except Clara. Her calls were the only thread connecting him to his old life, to the person he used to be. He still sent her money, but now it felt more like ransom than a gift. Then one evening, as he sat alone in his darkened living room, a familiar smell filled the room. Clay. Sulfur. The lights flickered, and then a shadow formed in the corner of the room. Alistair standing there as if he had stepped out of the wall itself. He hadn't aged a day. It is time, he said calmly, his unchanging voice cutting through Leo's alcoholic fog. You must give another name. And this time, you have no choice. He placed a small black leather-bound book on the coffee table. This time it must be of your bloodline. Then he was gone. The book lay there silent and menacing. Leo knew what it meant. He had only one person in his bloodline. Clara. No, it couldn't be. Anyone, but not her. She was the reason he had done all this. She was the one who had sacrificed everything for him. He could not do it. That night he dreamed. He dreamed of his childhood home, the small house they had lost after their parents died. He was sitting at the kitchen table across from himself. But his double's face was dark as if consumed by shadows, And worse, the double was smiling, its lips stained with blood. "You sold yourself well," it whispered, its voice both familiar and alien. "You did not lie. You went all the way." Leo wanted to scream to wake up, but his body refused to move. And the double continued, "Now look at me closely. This is who you are becoming." The image shattered. He woke up gasping for air, his sheets soaked in a cold sweat. The next morning, in a fit of desperation, he did something he never thought he would do. He sought help outside the material world. He found a woman, a psychic, in a small shop in a rundown neighborhood. She was old with deep-set eyes that saw everything. He told her everything, leaving out the most gruesome details. But she seemed to know already. When he finished, she just looked at him for a long time, then said simply, "You have eaten. Now the stomach demands." "What can I do?" Leo pleaded. The old woman stared at him, her gaze holding no pity, only raw truth. "Nothing. Only pay." "How?" he whispered, though he already knew the answer. "With a name, or with blood. And if there are no more names to give..." The woman's silence was more brutal than any answer. "Then it is you." That evening, Leo returned to his penthouse. He didn't turn on the lights. He sat on the floor in the dark and listened. He could hear his own heartbeat, a steady drumbeat heralding his end. He sat there for a long time, motionless, his eyes wide open in the darkness, as if waiting for a sign, an answer, a miracle. But nothing came. Only this silence and the memory of his sister, Clara. The one who had bathed him, held him, fed him, picked him up. The one he was supposed to protect at all costs. The one who had given all her light so that he could stand in a crooked world. He couldn't do it to her. Not to her. She had already given everything. She still bore the scars of her sacrifice. He stood up. He took a pen. He opened the black leather-bound book. And on the first page, he wrote his own name. Leo. Just once. Slowly the letters trembled, then began to bleed, fresh red ink soaking through the page. The book snapped shut on its own and vanished in a puff of black smoke. Leo felt a sharp pain in his chest, a coldness spreading through his body. He knew he didn't have much time. 2 days passed. For Leo, they were as long as a lifetime and as fleeting as the blink of an eye. He didn't eat, didn't sleep. He just sat by his floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city he had bought with his soul. He felt no fear, not anymore. Just an emptiness, a serene acceptance. He had made his choice. The contract was sealed with his own name. He thought of Clara. He hoped she would be okay. The money he had sent her, wisely invested, would ensure her a comfortable life. She could finish her studies, travel, have a family. She could live the life she was supposed to have, the one she had sacrificed for him. That thought was his only comfort. On the 3rd day, Clara arrived. She had tried to call him dozens of times, but he hadn't answered. Worried, she had driven from her small town to Cleveland. When the building manager let her into the penthouse, she found him. He was sitting in his favorite armchair, facing the window, looking toward the distant lake. He looked peaceful, almost asleep. But when she touched his shoulder, his body was cold. The silence in the room was heavy, absolute. "Leo," she whispered, but she already knew. Tears streamed down her face as she knelt beside him. It was then that she noticed something in his clenched hand. She gently pried his fingers open. It was a small, carefully folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. Written in small, trembling letters were his last words. "What we give away will always come back doubled." As soon as she read the words, the paper grew hot in her hand. She cried out and dropped it. It burst into flames instantly, a smokeless fire that turned it to ash before it could hit the ground. Clara didn't understand. She didn't understand the paper, the fire, or the void she felt emanating from her brother's body. But she sensed that something had been taken away forever. A strange warmth spread through her chest, a feeling that wasn't her own. A single tear rolled down her cheek, not of grief, but of an emotion she couldn't name. It was as if a part of the burden she had carried her whole life, had suddenly been lifted, but the price for that relief was unimaginable. She would never know the truth about Leo's wealth. She would never know about the Zoya Society, the rituals, or the names that were given. For her, his death would always remain an inexplicable tragedy, a wound that would never fully heal. But sometimes late at night, when she looked up at the sky, she would feel a presence, a protective warmth. She would remember her brother not as the distant, tormented man he had become, but as the little boy who had once promised to take care of her. And in a way, he had kept his promise. Because there are shortcuts that cost more than 1,000 trials. Every favor accepted without question, every fortune that arrives without light demands a price. And that price one day will come knocking, even if you close your eyes, even if you forget. Because the stomach of the darkness never forgets. It does not erase, it just waits.